by virtue of the clothing, equipment, weapons, and culture we witness. The police represent a real threat to Black lives. Militarized police should not be deployed daily on our campuses, given the low incidence of violent crime. This police presence strikes fear and terror in the Black campus community. CFA needs the voices of Black students across the country as they call for universities to divest from police institutions, for the removal of this deeply racist institution from our sites of higher learning, and toward the full abolition of police. CFA further calls for the CSU to direct the vast resources spent on policing to resourcing Black and ethnic studies, along with targeted hiring of Black faculty, so that faculty diversity reflects the CSU student body diversity. Towards this end, we also call for the CSU to endorse Assembly Constitutional Amendment 5, abolishing Proposition 209, thus rendering our ability to pursue and enact racial justice. So we took that as a call to action for our campus, because if our union statewide is making these really powerful statements, then it's important for us as faculty, staff, students at SJSU to take this call to action very seriously. I did do some investigating about our campus police budget, and I was able to get some figures and numbers, which I'm happy to share. In 2019-2020, the projected budget for the university police department exceeded $7 million. So when the CFA is calling to say, hey, let's defund police and use those resources elsewhere, we are literally talking about millions of dollars. So the Anti-Racism Social Justice Transformation Group is bringing these two examples of the deaths that are associated with San Jose PD. Both of these deaths share a commonality in the sense that they did not occur on campus, but in that mile radius around campus that is the jurisdiction of SJSU PD. One death continues to show that Black lives matter less when it comes to policing, and we'll be hearing from Gregory Johnson's mother, Denise, on her experience in dealing with police and the death of her son at an off-campus fraternity. The other death shows that the militarized reality of the USA-Mexico border policing, that it still has deadly effects on the lives of undocumented immigrants in places far from the border, like in San Jose. And we'll be hearing from Lori Valdez, Antonio Lopez's life partner and mother of his child, Hosea, about her experience in the search for justice, transparency, and accountability. So now we have unfortunately seen the rise of white supremacy sweep over our nation in a manner of open visibility that we've never seen in this century. And the news media's recent coverage of anti-Asian hate and violence is another example where people of color, Black, Brown, Asian, Native American, mixed race, are subject to structural and discursive violence with little or no change or accountability in sight. So we organized this event to help change that rising tide of hate here at San Jose State University and in our greater community. We hope you all join us in an intersectional way with alliances across racial, ethnic, class, gender, sexuality, disability, and citizenship lines to rise up against this white supremacy and to resist hate and violence within a broad-based grassroots coalition. We must fight, and most importantly, we must fight together. Before we begin, I'd like to make a few additional acknowledgements. First, I'd like to thank the Anti-Racism Social Justice Transformation, our faculty union's Anti-Racist Committee, for their hard work organizing this event. I would like to thank our co-sponsors of the event, which is the Department of African American Studies and Chicano Studies. I'd like to thank Oscar Santiano, our CFA campus field rep, for helping with the Zoom today. Thanks to Nazi Medrano, who made the various flyers for this event. Monica Noriego for providing counselor support for the opening and closing of this event, as well as to our very, very brave guest speakers, Denise Richards and Lori Valdez, as well as Simone Jackson, Tiffany Yep, and Lana Gomez. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Monica Noriega, a counselor from the Anti-Police Terror Project. Monica?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. As Sang mentioned, we are here today because white supremacy is perpetuating violence and trauma on our bodies. And one of the ways that white supremacy does this is by having us hold that trauma and that pain in isolation. So what I'd like for us to do, just to sort of open up the space, is to come together as a community to metabolize some of that trauma and reconnect with the ways that we can allow each other to release that pain and also hold our collective strength together. So if you are able to stand up, I invite you to stand up. If you would like to remain seated, you can also remain seated. But I will have us all stand up if you are able to. And together we are going to do a body-based regulation exercise just to bring us into the here and now and invite our bodies to release and bring each other into the present moment. So we're just gonna rub our tummies together for 15 seconds. Notice the pacing, notice the warmth for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now take all that warmth you derived from your sacrum and place it on your eyes. These eyes that have seen so much pain, these eyes that witness so much violence, allow them to rest into the palms of your hands. And I invite you all to take a collective breath in. And as you breathe out, allow your hands to fall into your lap. And you may take your seats again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay. So now we'll begin with Denise Johnson and Simone Jackson. Let me just go ahead and screen share.
Okay, I'm sorry, Sang. I'm going to have to refer back to my notes, and I don't know how to switch screens and all that kind of stuff.
Sure thing.
So,
I'm gonna
yeah.
keep pace with you, so I'll advance the screen for you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now what does that mean? You'll advance. You'll be able to see my notes?
She'll put each of the slides up for you. And the slides have most of the information that you sent me in your notes.
Okay.
But if
Oh,
you
okay.
want to
All
bring
right.
your original notes, you could read the slide presentation from the screen that Sang is presenting.
So right now I have the title page of your PowerPoint up right now. Mhm. So you can begin at any time.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me to speak about what happened to my son at San Jose State in the Sigma Chi fraternity house in 2008. Where's the next one, Simone? Or Sang?
Can you go to the next slide, please?
Mhm.
Next slide. And this is where the facts start for you, Denise.
Okay, I don't see I don't see the screen. I don't see the slide.
Okay, so the slide says Clear Lake Police notified me of Gregory's death.
Okay. Sorry, you all.
No worries. Do you want me
This is
to?
actually.
I could read.
No, I can go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Clear Lake and November 22nd.
You want to share your screen and we can get you back to where you can see the Zoom?
Now, what do I need to do?
If you want, we can guide you how to see the Zoom. Is that what
Okay, there. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Forgive me, everyone. I'm not Still new to this stuff.
We
Um,
all are.
Too.
Okay. Okay. Clear Lake Police notified me November 22nd, 2008. Two Clear Lake police officers, actually 4, it was 2 squad cars, came to my home, and Officer Stuhler came in and told me that my son Gregory was dead and that he had committed suicide. I passed out on the floor. I got no notification from the administration, no notification from San Jose State police officers, no notification from the city of San Jose police officers who claimed they weren't on the scene. Although, as you see, we have their names with their badge numbers. Ryan Doty was there. Octavio Morales was there. Jesse Aragon was there. Sergeant James Ardwan Jr. was there. These people were listed on Ladorce Cordell's final report. She was the IPA for San Jose, the city of San Jose Police Department. At the time, she was Judge Ladorce Cordell, and she put the names in her report. I did not make this up. Number 2, please.
It's there.
The Santa Clara County Coroner's Office refused me the right to see my child as next of kin. When I asked why, they said, when I asked to identify his body, they said that the fraternity brothers had already identified him, and that he was identified by his also by his ID card. So that's why I didn't see his body. It took us 10 days, not 13. I wasn't lying about the 13 days. I just forgot. It's been 12 years, and I do have to refer to notes. I'm getting old, y'all. I thought that they had the wrong person. That's why one reason I thought it was anybody but my child. I thought they had just had the wrong person. I knew, first of all, I knew Gregory would never kill himself. Never. It took us 10 days to transport his body home, although the coroner's office did offer to cremate him down there, but I wasn't having it. Just like they cremated Brendan Tigg's body. This is fact, not fiction. The university, the Johnson, we arrived at the Sigma Chi fraternity house on November 23rd. And when I entered the house, I smelled the strong smell of pine sol, which I'd never smelled before. It hit me right then. But of course, I didn't say anything because basically I was walking in shock, trying to find out, trying to look in somebody's face that I thought would tell the truth. Detective Wong told me that Gregory killed himself because he owed $4,000 in student loans. How he knew this, I don't know. On that day, Gregory wouldn't kill himself for a $4,000 student loan when he was well on his way planning to be a doctor. He wouldn't have killed himself, period. It's against our faith, it's against our Constitution, and Black people do not hang themselves. As a rule, we don't commit suicide. It has happened. I'm not saying it's never happened, but what I am telling you is that it didn't happen to Gregory. Okay, the next day, that same day, my family met with Andre Barnes, and he told me that the investigation was closed, point blank, period, that it was a suicide. They weren't going to do any more investigation. That was what? Saturday, Sunday, Monday, he told me this. The investigation was over. That was the only contact that I had with SJSU police at that time was Officer Barnes and Officer Wong. The next one, please.
Sure thing.
We went to view Gregory's body at the funeral home, Jones Funeral Home, because we had to, first of all, we had to raise $5,000 or the funeral home wouldn't come pick him up. That's one reason why it took so long of a time for us to get him home. When I was there, I told my husband, I brought him in this world. I dressed him when he came out the nursery, and I was going to dress him for the last time. There was an attendant there. My daughter sat out in the where the chairs and stuff was. She didn't look because she just couldn't take it. And my husband was standing there when I saw a 6-inch crack oozing some kind of white matter. And I moved the box. There was a styrofoam box under his head, and I moved it, and his head fell backwards in my hand, and I laid his head on the table. It was as if his head wasn't connected to his body. The spinal column wasn't connected. It was just like floppy. It flopped backwards in my hand, and I laid it on the table, his head. I asked the attendant, what was the crack on the back of my son's head? And he said he didn't know. That was the funeral home attendant. Next, please.
Yep.
After the interaction, when I got home, I called the coroner's office, and because I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. I wanted to know how the crack, why, first of all, I mentioned that my son's head wasn't attached to the spine, that it flopped back in my hands. And I was talking to Claudine, and she told me, oh, well, she just laughed and said, and I'm not kidding you, she laughed. Okay, anybody that I tell you that laughed, they laughed. Because see, my son wasn't human down there at San Jose State. That's why nobody in administration, whoever handles the killing of kids down there, whoever is supposed to notify you, didn't feel like they had to call that Black family up in Clear Lake. Next.
Yep.
Gregory's case was invested by the independent auditor, Judge Doris Cordell, the FBI, which I got a report from Doris Cordell. I only got 10 pages of a 290-page report of what happened to Gregory. Okay, they gave me 10 pages because the FBI said that it was a matter of national security. There might be rioting if they found out what happened to him down there. Okay, and the rest of the pages were phone conversations between me and him and requests for information from agencies from him. 10 pages, no more, no less. Okay, in his report, he did mention it I guess it was his opinion, because this was not an official FOIA. An official FOIA would have included how my son died, why he died, not just his opinion. In his opinion, it was not a hate crime. That's what he said. Okay, but we all know the FBI doesn't investigate suicide, so it was some kind of crime that he never talked about in the 10 pages, but it's in the 290, along with the autopsy pictures I never received. Don't you let any police officer or any teacher, anybody in that university tell you that I received all the papers, because they're lying. They're either lying and they haven't read the case, or they're with whoever killed my son. Because all I have hit is a wall of lies from day one. I got no report from San Jose Police Department. I got a 63-piece 10-page report, just 63 pages from the campus police. It was redacted. It was pieced in. Okay, I got no report from Dana Overstreet, who was head of the homicide division, because yes, my son's case did go to homicide because it was a homicide. Okay, but because this system allowed rich white kids to go on with their life after they killed my son, bashed his head in and broke his neck. They felt they didn't need to go to court. You see it all the time. And just like the Asian community is experiencing now, the police officer that was involved with the man that shot the Asians in the massage parlor, he said he was just having a bad day. Welcome to being Black. Next page.
Yeah.
I want to add one.
Overstreet told me.
Oh, sorry.
Pardon me.
I just wanted to add one thing about the FBI report. That Denise knows that the FBI investigation for the hate crime started in the Campbell office. They told her that if it seemed like a hate crime, it would be elevated to the next level. From there, it went to San Francisco. And then from there, they elevated it to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is where they stopped releasing answers. But if there was no indication that it was a hate crime, it would have never been elevated from Campbell to San Francisco and then to Washington, D.C. That's all that I have to add.
Yes, that's true. Dana Overstreet told me that this was a suspicious case, that she wouldn't leave any stone unturned, and that she was going to call a press conference after she had gathered all the information, no matter however it went. She would call a press conference. I would come up there and talk with her. Okay. After that day, I tried to call her in a few weeks. No Dana Overstreet. District Attorney Thompson told me that she was sick. And after that, she never returned to work, to my knowledge. My goodness, I've lost the.
Next slide, please.
No, I've lost the next slide. I don't see it.
Oh, it says District Attorney Jeff Rosen.
Okay, District Attorney Jeff Rosen, my husband and I met with him, and I showed him the picture that I took, and I had to show him that picture because he didn't bring his pictures. He had autopsy pictures. He knew what happened to my child. He knew they murdered my child in that room, in that house. Okay, he looked at my picture of the crack on the back of my son's head and told me he could have been walking around for a week like that. Well, I guess a white supremacist would think that, wouldn't he? Because only something that's not human can walk around with a crack. Well, I don't even know animals couldn't walk around with cracks in their head and walk around for a week. But this was his response. So I shouldn't really be upset, should I? But I am still upset. Yeah. When I bring this up, I am upset. Next page, please. Here are the pictures.
So this is a trigger warning. Photos taken by.
Yes, ma'am.
In the next slide.
Okay, you have to kind of switch them around. Here you can see me holding the blanket back. And you see his neck area. Okay, now there is some shading there, and that is because of the lighting. There were no ligature marks, and you see the crack on the back of his head. The autopsy was missing critical information. There were no drawings, no photographs, other than the photos I took myself. The crack on the back, and that what did not come with the autopsy. That was separate. I already had those at home. Okay, the crack in Gregory's skull was not in the autopsy. There are pictures of rope burns from other racist attacks. Are those up, Simone? The rope burns?
Yeah, they're in the presentation, so people can see them.
And now this is, when you see the rope burns, can you imagine if a rope will burn you that bad? Can you imagine hanging almost 3 hours on a 14 gauge orange extension cord? What it would have tore his neck apart. He wouldn't have had a neck. Gregory weighed 210 pounds and he was 6'4". Although there's always people just write what they want to. I'm his mother, I know. Okay. Gregory weighed 210 pounds. Now you think he can hang for 2.5 hours with no damage to his neck? Okay. And then there was nothing. There was nothing there because he never hung. He was beaten to death. He had a crack in the back of his head and they broke his neck to make sure he was dead. Next page, please.
Ways you can support.
Here are the ways you can support. So Simone, you want to
Next slide.
take that one for me?
Yeah, so the ways you can support is, since this case is being re-examined right now, it's really critical that the Johnson family gets a lawyer who they can trust. And so you can donate funds to Ms. Johnson's Venmo. It's right there. If you don't have Venmo, there is a GoFundMe that I have set up to deposit directly into her account. But I just want to be transparent that the GoFundMe makes her re-verify her identity multiple times. And so there have been challenges sometimes, and Venmo is the way that you can can ensure that your funds are quickly given to Ms. Johnson. And lack of funds has been a really big challenge in this case so far. Ms. Johnson and I basically wrote the lawsuit ourselves with the help of a paralegal, and I filed it myself. I don't have a law background. We just looked up how to do it, and that was because we didn't have the resources. So all of the donations that have been made and also all of the social media amplification that people have done has been of the utmost important. So thank you, and please continue to amplify. Next slide, please. And then also you can follow us on social media. I've listed our Instagram, which is Justice for Gregory Johnson. The Twitter is Justice for Gregory, and the Facebook is Justice for Gregory. That is run by students, but they are constantly checking with Ms. Johnson. So all of these platforms are what Ms. Johnson wants put out into the community in terms of messaging. These are the best ways to stay updated on how you can support the campaign, and also see sort of like how the family is reacting to statements and news that is coming out. For example, the coroner's office quietly let Ms. Johnson know that this case was being re-examined. And when we told journalists and they tried to confirm, they would not confirm that information. So they really did not want anybody to know that this has been re-examined. We have been able to get the word out. And so that just shows how this is critical for pressuring them. We also have a website with action items. You can sign the petition. You can email elected officials. If you click on the links, there's some templates that automatically pop up. You can edit them as well. Somebody, Lana, I believe, dropped the website in the chat and the social media in the chat. So please refer to that. And then there's also a link tree, which contains a document that has more media, because there's been a lot of news articles written about this. Please follow the social media, because the Student Film Club has made a documentary to help shed light on all of the corruption that went into covering this up. And we will be showing that film in order to spread awareness and also raise additional funds. Thank you. That's all that I have to say.
Sang,
Yes.
I know I've gone over time. Can I say one last thing?
Of course, Janice.
I just want to, first of all, I want to thank the Asian community. I want to thank everybody, but I want to thank, I'm talking to the Asian community, because it's a concentrated effort to make it look like Black people want to attack you. Okay. We cannot defend ourselves, first of all. We can't protect our children, whether they're gang members or they go to university. We have no power in this country. You need to rethink that and call a spade a spade. That's an old saying in Chicago when they're playing the cards, call a spade a spade. Honey, this is about white supremacists. You see the reaction when they killed your people. They killed thousands of us, and we've never gotten justice. We got a bunch of empty promises, lies, and everything else. Everything was reneged on. No, we're not after you. Why should we be? Why should we? You have more power than we do, and we were born here, most of us, and most of you too now. This is about ending, defunding police, no matter what color they are, They need to go. I remember when you didn't have police in universities. I'm that old. And I remember when I grew up doing Jim Crow. So white supremacy is nothing new to me. I was just like everybody else. I just didn't think it would happen to my child. Thank you. Thank you, Sane. Goodbye.
Thank you, Denise. Yeah, I think it was important that you mentioned that, you know, we have to keep our eyes on white supremacy and we need to work together to dismantle it. That's the problem.
Denise.
Okay. And without further ado, let me go ahead and load up Denise's. Slideshow, click exit. Okay, why am I exiting? Okay. Alrighty. Screen share. Okay, our next guest speaker is Lori Valdez.
Hi, thank you, Professor Singh, for inviting me, and thank you for everybody who's here today to allow me to share what has happened with what happened to Antonio, and how till this day it's still impacts our young son Josiah, who was 4, he's now 11, going to be 12 this year, and how important it is to keep Antonio's name out there and to remind people of what happened to him shouldn't have happened, and how it was a big cover up from the UPD, San Jose State University, the UPD, San Jose PD, the district attorney, the attorney general, Kamala Harris, that they all partake in trying to keep what happened to Antonio under radar, that they, you know, what they did. So on February 21st, it was a Friday morning, Antonio, somebody made a call. This is Antonio, and he was, let me tell you who Antonio was. He was a father. Move to the next one, saying. He was a father, he was a stepfather, he was a son, uncle, brother, and he was my common law partner. Antonio was from Nayarit, Mexico, and he had been living in San Jose since he was 21. He was undocumented, and he didn't speak or understand much English. He was 38 at the time of his death. Antonio usually worked as a landscaper. He also did construction labor, mover, and building partitions. Antonio also volunteered for 4 years every Friday to the food ministry at the Antioch Baptist Church, with who served the downtown community. Majority of them were the senior citizens. And Antonio was the type of person, he enjoyed helping others, and he was very generous with whatever he had to spare. And he had a very gentle and very quiet demeanor. Next. What happened on February 21st is, this is what we know. There was a male caller who called about a man walking through campus with a knife, acting weird. Officers Vanderhoek and Santos followed Antonio off campus near 8th and San Salvador, where he was shot. Officers approached Antonio with guns drawn, yelling commands which he would not have understood. Vanderhoek claimed that Antonio was catatonic and that the taser had no effect. Santos claimed that Antonio was about to stab Vanderhoek and he was afraid he would succeed, so he shot Antonio twice, killing him. The officers interviewing girls in the sorority house where one of the bullets went in through the window, the officer there told the girls in the house they had to shoot Antonio because they both had kids and they wanted to get home to them. And one of the girls happened to know one of my older daughters, and she said to them, well, he has kids too. And when she said that to them, the officers like stood quiet, they got up and they walked out of the room. Nothing was ever talked about that again. Next slide, please. What we know is that both officers, they had body cameras. And the homicide detective Martinez confirmed he saw 2 videos the day that I went to the San Jose Police Department, which was, he was killed on Friday. I went the following Monday. And he confirmed to me, not knowing, I was told him I wanted to know what happened, that I was with his Antonio's sisters. And since they didn't speak English, I was there and that he was my partner. And he confirmed that he saw 2 videos and that he had turned them over to the district attorney's office. But as time went on, I met with Mark Buller, who was the district attorney on the case. I met with him, Jeff Moore, Richard Konda, and Raj Jadavid from Debug. They all went with me to this meeting to talk to them and ask them about the body cam, about evidence. And Mark Buller said there was only 1 video to us. And I questioned him, like, how are you gonna say there was 1 video when Raul Martinez just finished telling me, like when I talked to him that he saw 2, now you're telling me there's 1. And he said, well, there's 1 and partial of another one. And I said, well, why won't they be released? And he said, well, that's up to Jeff Rosen. And also the girls in the sorority house were told not to speak to anyone because we did canvassing every Friday at the time that Antonio was killed. And whenever there were girls from the sorority house that we'd approach, the sorority mom would come out right away, pull them in and threaten us. And we tried to get the girls to talk, and you could see that a few of them wanted to talk, but they were told not to talk to us at all. So that was kind of a red light for us, like something's going on. Next slide, please. And supposedly, this is what was said, what we knew back in 2004, that San Jose PD had taken over the scene and the investigation. That San Jose UPD Internal Affairs was doing their own investigation, and that the officers were put on paid administration leave. Basically, they had a vacation for killing Antonio, which Officer Santos, 2 days after he killed Antonio, he's posting pictures of him, his wife, and his 2 boys in Legoland that I came across later. Vanderhoek was the only officer who knew how to download the body cam videos from the UPD. Next slide. There's also a plainclothes officer that was on the scene, Barnes. And Barnes was also, I think, an officer who was involved with or talked with Denise too, when Antonio was killed, but he was never once mentioned in the beginning. Vanderhoek was working for the district attorney's office as a legal law clerk before, during, and even after Antonio was killed. And yet they claimed there was no conflict of interest because they were investigating an officer who was working for their department as a legal law clerk. And so they kept avoiding answering me if he worked there. The DA Rosen, he justified Antonio's murder 15 months later. And he refused releasing the video to the public, but he said that he would allow 5 people of my choosing to watch the video privately. And so I had the attorney that I had at the time, which he's fired, but I had Richard Konda, Jeff Moore, and my son-in-law, and I was supposed to have Raj Jadavid from Silicon Valley Debug, but the DA told me that if I wanted him to go in, they weren't going to let anybody see it because Raj is part of media. And I told him, well, he's not going as media, he's going as a support person to watch the video for me, but they denied it. And when I went to the DA's, when we went, there was so many undercover FBI, like so much surveillance and security at the DA's office. Like if I was gonna blow up the place, it was like ridiculous. We walked in there, on every single floor there were guys in suits with earpieces in their ears and guns on every level. That we went up the elevator, we went on the floor where we were going to go talk to, and they were going to see the video. And when we got off the elevator, there's a lot of them outside the elevator too, and then we go in a room And Rosen tells me that he went 10 years into Antonio's criminal record history. That's how far he went back looking for stuff. And then he tried to tell me, did you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? 10 years ago has nothing to do with happened that day. And so he played a short, brief recording of the 911 call, but I couldn't hear it clearly because my mind, I was just like really having anxiety because I didn't want to see the video. I wasn't ready to. And so when they were going to show the video, I walked out of the room, and Jeff Rosen also walked out with me out of the room. So Jeff Rosen never saw the video himself because he let his assistant district attorney, which was Matt Shapiro, and I can't think of the other one, but there was 2 other district attorneys because then Mark Butler had quit prior to all of this going further. He decided he was going to retire. And so then the case was put on a gag order without my consent by my attorney and the UPD attorney before it even got to a courtroom or a jury. Next slide. So the case was dismissed twice in the summary judgment stage, and mind you, in the summary judgment stage, the Friday before that summary judgment was dismissed, they subjected my son, who was 5 years old at the time, they made him give a deposition when he wasn't even there when his dad was killed, but they were trying to make it look like Antonio wasn't a part of my son's life, and they really traumatized my son unnecessarily because they were asking him questions about, do you remember seeing your dad in a room where he was laying down? Like, they were reminding my son of him having to see his dad in his coffin. And I was in the room and I had to stay quiet. And it was so hard because my son was so terrified. That was hard for me to allow this person to question my son and try to bring up memories of what he saw so young that, I wanted to get across that table and hit her. But they did that. And then the Friday, and then on Monday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, the case was dismissed. One of the main witnesses in Antonio's case, her name was Larissa Norens. She was never interviewed, and her boyfriend, his name was Sergio, he was good friends with the UPD cops, per the conversation that I had with her personally on the phone, because she left a message under a candle and asked for the family of Antonio to please give her a call that she had some information. And so when I talked to her, first thing I asked her is, I know what they're saying, but I know Antonio, and I just need you to tell me the truth. Did he really do what they're saying he did? And she said, they're lying. He did not do nothing like that. They're lying. They killed him for no reason. And she said that she was across the street from where it happened. And that she said she just all of a sudden, she seen him, but he wasn't bothering nobody, but she didn't pay attention. The cops came, it happened so quick that she said, then she pulled out her phone when she jumped behind a tree. And she said that she started recording, I don't remember recording or took pictures, and then that a plainclothes officer turned around and caught her, and she panicked. And so she pretended like she was going to talk on the phone. And instead of going to the university in the direction she was going, she did an about face and started going the opposite way towards the liquor store down the street from where Antonio was killed. Next slide. So from the time 2014 happened up until 2019, I've been trying to get the body cam videos, trying to get information on what happened to him. And it was both what we found out. I filed SB 1421, which was a bill that was signed into law. And that on January 1st, 2019, I was able to file for all the information under that new law. And so what we found out was that both Vanderhoek and Santos were CI trained officers, and neither one of them followed the protocol with their training. Also, that Santos had his taser and his gun out at the same time when he shot Antonio, and that's not part of policy either. That, I forgot what it's called when you do that, but it was something that they did in Oscar Grant's case, where the officer had the gun and he had the taser and he got that they said some kind of confusion type of a scenario. Well, Santos had his taser and his gun, and it's in the video that was released. You can see it. Also, in some of the reports that I got, Santos said while they were taking him down to the San Jose Police Department, he made a comment in his report. It says, "I should have shot him earlier," to a San Jose police officer who was escorting him to be interviewed. But the officer didn't question him what he said or anything. He just put it down in his report. Next slide. So what we found in the 1421, that not only in the beginning when they said that Vanderhoek was the only one who knew how to download these body cameras from the UPD, in the reports, the body cameras videos went through various hands to be downloaded when only one person was supposed to have had authorization to do it. The body cameras were given back to the officers immediately, and then they collected them again 2 weeks later and asked the officers if they had erased anything or had they done anything to the videos, which to me was absurd. And there was 3 officers who were taken down to the San Jose PD for questioning, but only 2 had their service pistols checked into evidence. That was Vanderhoek and Santos. Detective Barnes, who was there in plain clothes, his pistol was never checked into evidence. Next slide. On one of the reports, I think it's on Santos's report, it says, asterisk at the bottom of the page, it says, to return the gun to the officer and not to put it into the DOJ database, which to me, that was another red flag. When an officer uses his pistol, they're supposed to put it into the DOJ database so they can keep track of the officers that deploy their guns that are using them. There was also a female UPD officer by the name of Tazio. She was one of the 3 officers that was over Antonio's body, and she also escorted his body to the morgue and had a body camera that wasn't functioning properly. So she says when they took her, when they interviewed her, she said that she had a body camera, but it wasn't really marking time and date right. So my question was, if she's working for the UPD and the students through through their tuitions, you're paying for these things, why are they having officers wearing body cameras that aren't functioning properly so we can know what's really happening? But that wasn't brought up. And then Vanderhoek mentions in his deposition on the reports that we got through the SB 1421 that he says that the taser did work on Antonio. And they asked him why. He says, because Antonio clenched his hand and his arm went up, which previously he stated in the beginning that it didn't work on Antonio. So when Antonio's hand clenched up, he wasn't charging at Officer Vanderhoek. It was a reaction to the taser from being tased that they had said never worked on him. Next slide. In the video that was released on Antonio's case, there's a 17-minute video that was released, but the media released a 1-minute part of it, but there's a whole full 17-minute one. And if you watch the video through, you see Vanderhoek, who is the one that tased Antonio. He isn't removed from the scene right away like he should have been. He, in fact, is the one wearing the body camera, and he is setting up the crime scene. He's taking pictures and he's removing evidence before San Jose PD realizes he was one of the officers involved. In the video, that the part that I saw, when they're about to shoot Antonio, there's you could see a shadow of him pulling his nightstick out and rolling it under Antonio's feet. Antonio's about to fall, and that's when he yells, shoot him, right? And so after he's dead and everything, Vanderhoek walks around the body, picks up his nightstick and puts it back into his uniform, whatever, right? And when I asked Charlie Foss, who is the CFO of San Jose State University, when we got to see it, that in the report of the, of the crime scene of everything that was there was a nightstick on the floor, and we showed it to him. I said, how come that's not in the diagram of all the stuff like that's in the crime scene right here? Why isn't that marked there? It was clearly part of the crime scene. And he said he didn't know, he'd have to look into it. And he responded like a month and a half later, and he says, well, because the officer said that it accidentally fell out, so he had, picked it up, which is a total lie, because those are snaps secured in. There's no way it just fell out like that. And he also said that the San Jose State University PD doesn't keep records of officers' misconduct. That what I'm entitled to through the SB 1421 from the university, that there's nothing of that kind of information to give me. And then Santos also says in his deposition, under the circumstance, I didn't feel using my pistol was necessary, but used it because I was ordered to shoot. This is the officer who shot Antonio in the back twice. One of the bullets went straight through Antonio's heart. So they said he died at the hospital. They're lying. He was dead on the scene. They were just manipulating his body to make sounds because he was already dead. Next slide. What my next steps are is to try to get every single body camera, video, dash cam, photos, and his personal belongings. I also want to hire a private investigator to get a notarized statement from Larissa Norens and any video or picture she said she had. And also to get statements from the girls in the sorority house who were silenced back in 2014. Next slide. I want to get the case reinvestigated by a special prosecutor and reopened. Find an attorney willing to take the case and hold every single agency accountable and persons involved in this cover-up to remove the cops from all the campuses and the militarized weapons off our street. Next. I really need to get, I really need help trying to get discipline and misconduct records of all the UPD officers who were at the scene. According to Charlie Foss, he said that they don't keep them, but I'm pretty sure they have to. If they have an internal affairs on there, why wouldn't they? Find out why UPD never did their own investigation in Antonio's case. Why was there never an investigation of their own done in his case? And then to get the policy on their body cam, their CIT protocol, and their discipline. They have not wanted to release any of that information to me. Next slide. So this is where Justice for Josiah was born, came out of. Josiah was 4 and Antonio was his dad. And the kind of father that Antonio was, he would want his son to be taken care of. So that's why I put it in Justice for Josiah, because Antonio's dead. There's no more justice for him. He will never come back to life. He will never be able to be the father he was so looking forward to being and watching his son grow up. But for Josiah, who has to grow up fatherless for the rest of his life and be living with this trauma, there has to be some form of justice so he can grow up to be a healthy, responsible positive human being. And so, you know, I focus on the trauma of the children that have lost their parents to police violence. And I've done research, and 2 out of 3 children are exposed to trauma and violence. But in those data, none of the children that have lost a parent to police violence are included in this kind of data. Next slide. So this is just my mission statement. I want to raise awareness to get the community's combined voices to protect and prevent further trauma to our most vulnerable children and youth and their families who have been impacted by state-sponsored violence, police violence, and are suffering the trauma and the aftermath. We want to change and reform laws, policies, and practices that are punitive and that only create a hostile and negative environment. Example of police brutality, militarization, mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline. We all have an important role as adults to ensure children and youth do not live in fear and are not being re-victimized by state-sponsored violence in school, juvenile justice system, foster care, and the community who serve the public. Together, we can help restore trust and safety in our community for our most vulnerable, helping to heal, rebuild, and transform the lives of traumatized children and youth and the adults they will become. Hurt people will hurt other people, and I don't want my son to be a person to hurt other people. Next slide. So this is just what trauma does. It lasts forever, and that when children are not identified or supported, it puts them at higher risk for school failure, mental health disorders, substance abuse, involved in juvenile justice, re-victimization. They perpetrate violence, constantly in a fight, fright, freeze mode, higher risk of chronic illness and early death. This is according to the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies by the CDC. Next slide. School safety resources are out of balance. And this is my son Josiah at the bottom. This is when he was 5, when he was 7, and this is when he was 10. So as you can see, the trauma hasn't gone away. When you least expect it, he'll just break down and think he'll want his dad. He'll say he wants to die. My son has asked and said he feels like dying more times than any child should ever wish to die because he wants to see his father. And there's nothing in the world I can do to fix it. No medicine in the world's gonna fix it. Only justice can fix it, and the people who are responsible for hurting his father to be held accountable, because that's what he needs to feel safe again. But this is a problem because our schools, we have 1.7 million students in schools with police, but no counselors. 3 million students in school with police, but no nurses. 10 million students in school with police, but no social workers. 14 million students in school with police, but no nurses, psychologists, counselors, or social workers. And that's just not to say that they have to be counselors. They have to be trauma-sensitive, informed counselors, nurses, psychologists, social workers that know how to see trauma for what it is and how it impacts children. Next slide. How can a community effectively address, prevent, and help reduce children being exposed to police violence and trauma? We need trauma-informed systems, school, mental health, justice, law enforcement, social workers, pediatricians, child advocates. We need to invest in training tools to help systems identify and address trauma and prevent further harm. We need more trauma-informed counselors in our school. We need officers trained on impact of trauma annually, drug tested semi-annually, and held accountable. Next slide. How we can effectively do this, we do not need SROs, school resource officers, on any campuses from kindergarten to college. They only serve the school to prison pipeline and criminalizing people of color. We don't need to be investing in militarized police departments that continue to expose children and youth to their violent pattern of behavior with no accountability. We don't need repeat killer cops or those that have violent patterns of behavior. And we don't need AR-15s or any weapons of war in the hands of law enforcement in our streets. Next slide. How you can help individually, as a community, and politically. We can individually do cop watching, do neighborhood know your rights workshops, civilian oversight, learn about the first 24 after an officer involves shooting, which the 13 families in Santa Clara County, from our personal experiences with losing our loved ones, we came up with what to do the first 24 hours after, learning from what we went through, what we were put through, what the do's and the don'ts. And you can find that flyer on the Silicon Valley Debug website. And also there's a website with all the families that work with Debug, where it tells our stories. We're going to be having up all our reports, all the videos, any work we've done, some of the stuff where we can ask the community to support us. But most of all, we need our community to know the names and know the stories of the people who are in your own backyards. That's very important. As a community, the same thing. Know your rights, film the police, share on social media, educate yourself on the laws that negatively affect communities of color. Support families impacted in your community. Know the names and know the stories of the victims locally. Politically, we can mandate a zero tolerance for police brutality, require excessive force insurance for employment, no pay during the officer involved shooting investigation, special prosecutors for all officer involved shootings, and drug testing randomly, and to remove the qualified immunity. These are things that we really, those things in the politically, those are things that if we can get those changed and we get a community, we can get this done. We can start changing what's happening in our community and so much loss of life and trauma. Next. How you can support, donate, or learn more about Just for Josiah. Well, here's that flyer of the first 24 on the right, and the one on the left is a pledge honoring Antonio. And it was a pledge that we did in the beginning, and I hope all of you can, read it and say, know what it says. I'll read it for you. It says, I pledge to not remain silent against violence of any kind that hurts a child or youth through police, gangs, bullying, etc. I will not act violently or speak with hate, anger, and presence of any child or youth. Instead, I will speak up for truth and justice. I will always show love, compassion, and respect for all cultures. I will protect and prevent further harm to all children and youth. I will help rebuild hope, trust, and safety in a positive, caring way for our community. And this is a pledge I would hope everybody would take. So this way our children aren't seeing the evil in this world that's been happening lately. We need to protect them because they are our future. And if you want to contact me, I also have Just for Josiah every Christmas. I have a special Christmas from Heaven event that I hold for children in California who have lost a parent to police violence, who they'll come down. I have people who sponsor the children. We have meals to get, we'll have Santa Claus come, we'll have performers, we have share food together. This last year was kind of difficult, but we still pulled it off. We had it outside and we had masks and we did it, but every single day, more kids are being added to this list. The children they look forward to this event because this is a space where all the other kids know exactly what they're feeling, and they all lost the same thing. So if you want to get involved, there's the justiceforjosiah.org on Facebook. We have our event. You could go on there and you could see the video of this last year. or the years before, they're all on the Just for Josiah page. And there's my email if you want to contact me or see how you can get involved. Like I said, the families, we all work with Silicon Valley Debug, and we have a big project going on right now with having to go through all our reports. So if people want to get involved and help us go through stuff, you can contact any of the family members through Debug, or you can email me or contact me personally on my Instagram. Simone, I think, is putting it down for me, my Instagram or my Facebook or my Just for Josiah page. Next. Okay, so this is San Jose State University deaths and terrorism. So this is a timeline, and this is people who have died on campus. There's Lakeem Washington, he was assaulted on campus in 1997. Cottrell Collier, alleged suicide in 2006. There was Gregory Johnson in 2008, alleged suicide. 2013, there was Donald Williams III for racial bullying. 2014, Brendan Tiggs, alleged suicide. 2014, there was Antonio's murder by the UPD. 2015, there was an unknown woman was ruled a suicide. And then Alan Chen in 2015, he was a student at San Jose State University, was beaten and had a bag put over his head by the UPD, who were laughing and telling him not to bleed on their car. As far as the unknown woman, that one to me is very suspicious, because there was a woman who I had talked to 2 weeks prior to this suicide, she was a homeless woman, and she told me she knew some evidence about Antonio's death, and she wanted to meet with me in person. And she had said that the UPD had heard her like a few days prior, but she wanted to meet with me and tell me something in person. She didn't want to do it over the phone because she felt she was, and I never heard from her. I had her number and everything. I never heard from her. And then all of a sudden, like after that happened, 2 weeks later, there's this unknown woman ruled a suicide, that she jumped off the parking lot or something like that. And for whatever reason, I called her. I was trying to get a hold of her, and nobody has seen her. I asked people who knew her. They said they haven't heard from her either. So my suspicion is that that's the lady who was going to give me some information, and they ruled it a suicide, but who knows? They could have pushed her off the parking lot just to shut her up. So this is just a timeline of some of the deaths and suspicious deaths. They're all alleged suicides, all alleged, but look at who they are. They're all men of color. So I think that's the end of my presentation.
Could I add one more thing about a connection between these two cases?
Yes, go for it.
I just wanted to point out that Vanderhoek and Santos, the officers that Lori talked about in her presentation, were also the lead investigators for Gregory's case. And so that just shows you, like, that's two cases of corruption that they are involved in. And there could be more that we don't know about. This is just information that we've gotten from the directly impacted families, and also whisper networks have been really important amongst the community. People have witnessed things, have come forward in confidentiality. That has been really important in the investigation that these families have been forced to do themselves. So I just want to make that clear. A lot of the information that has come to light is because these families have done their own investigation with the support of the community. It's not because the police shed any truth about what happened. And that's all that I have to share. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Janice. Now we're going to hear from Tiffany Yap and Lana Gomez. They represent Students for Justice for Gregory Johnson. It's a new associated students group here at San Jose State University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Yap, and I'm a student advocate. I'm the president of Students for Gregory Johnson. And I also work with the main Justice for Gregory campaign to amplify his story. I run the social media and I created the petition. Next slide, please. So I heard about the Gregory Johnson case in my freshman year at SJSU, and this was because the Sigma Chi fraternity had gone viral throughout the school for posting a photo of them posing with Trump memorabilia. And this caused a lot of outrage at the school because of its implications of their history of racism. And some people brought up Gregory Johnson during this discussion. I didn't really know much about it at the time, and I became involved with the campaign last June during the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you also want to get involved, you can contact us at the student organization. If you are a student at SJSU, you can contact us at any of those handles and you can get involved as well. Next slide, please. So some of our student demands is to, of course, have the school acknowledge Gregory's case, and we also want them to work with the Johnson family to support reopening and re-examining his case. They have not done anything to reach out to them yet. And we also want to have the UPD have full transparency for Gregory's case, but also in general, and to have oversight on their actions. And we want to reform and at best abolish the campus police and to reallocate the funds they receive to student resources such as counseling and psychological services or resources for unhoused students. So things that would actually help students and the campus community. And another one of our demands is to turn the Sigma Chi House into a safe space and resource center for students of color. I believe that is also one of Denise Johnson's demands. And as students, we also want more support and resources for students of color. Next slide, please. So our advocacy has not come out unscathed. We actually did receive pushback from the school, and what you're seeing on the screen right now is part of an email that we got after a meeting. We were asked to meet with some student organization leaders, like from the school, and this was when the community group Black Outreach was creating an event for Gregory Johnson, and it was a protest to the Sigma Chi House. So we met with them and they told us that we could be held liable for anything that, like, if anything went wrong at this event, even though it was not our event, and we were forced to delete anything that we had posted advertising the event. And this was actually something that we saw as a violation of our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech as students. I'll be sharing our response to that in the chat. You can read it there. And next slide, please. The school has consistently reinforced the idea that Gregory Johnson had committed suicide despite other proof from his family, such as blood found on his belongings. They've consistently reinforced the idea of this, and it completely invalidates and ignores the claims by his family and also the advocacy of the community members. And you can see this in this email from the SJSU president, Mary Papazian, that was sent out to people who had emailed her about Gregory Johnson. And she did not address Gregory Johnson at all until months later. Next slide, please. She also had not addressed it publicly until last month. Last month, we all received this email in the SJSU community. And again, they're reaffirming that they believe that it was a suicide, even though Denise Johnson and community organizers had said otherwise. And they continue to just ignore everything that people have said, which is also reflective of the way that they treat students of color. Next slide, please.
Oops.
Oh, so this all goes back into one of our goals of defunding the police. This is, I believe this is from the last school year. And you can see that the budget for the SJSU PD is $7,052,170. And as you can see, 62% of that goes to salaries and 31% of that goes to benefits. So which means that our tuition dollars is not being used for operating expenses, which is only 6.3% of the budget. Our tuition dollars is basically being used only to pay people. And that is not where, I believe that for many students, that's not where we would want our tuition dollars to go. If we would like to have that money reallocated to things that will actually help students, because that is our tuition money. And I will be throwing it over to Lana now.
Everyone. I don't have my own personal slides, so I guess we'll keep it on this budget here. But my name is Lana Gomez, and I'm a senior at San Jose State University and vice president of students for Gregory Johnson. I would like to talk about my experience earlier in the semester when I was at a police forum with the San Jose State University Police Department. This meeting had about 14 people in attendance, including officers and San Jose State University staff members, partially because of the poor advertisement and only inviting student organization leaders to this event and not welcoming the whole entire campus community. The San Jose State University Chief of Police, Gina D. Nopali, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, started off the event by stating all the good things that police officers do on our campus. For example, she talked about getting lunch for a student who may have gotten into trouble because they were hungry. If that was the case, why isn't San Jose State University providing free food for our hungry students on campus rather than spending their budget on police officers? Officer Gina made it a point to say that San Jose State University officers are a part of the community and campus. I think it's important to note that unfortunately police officers are on our campus now because we've allowed them to be there, but that has not always been the case. Police officers were not on school campuses before the 50s, and it was actually a much safer environment for BIPOC students back then. During this forum with the police officers, I got the chance to ask direct questions to them about Gregory Johnson Jr. I got no direct answers from them. Officer Gina went on to tell me how she's reviewed Gregory's case and is very familiar with it. When I asked her why we as students are being denied access to his records because we are told they are purged every time we ask for them, even though she clearly had been reviewing the paperwork herself, her response was that Denise Johnson and the family has the full entire records already. That was a blatant lie, as you know from being at this forum today, at this Zoom event. She then continued to talk about Gregory's death as a suicide, and I had to stop her from being so disrespectful in this forum. I asked the officers more questions about their de-escalation tactics, and with every question I asked, I was given no direct answer and was told to refer to their website with the abundance of information they have on their website. I did not walk away from that police forum with my questions answered and no accountability was taken on their end. I strongly believe that we need police officers off our school campuses. As Tiffany showed earlier in her presentation, President Papazian issued a statement a while back regarding Gregory's death and what a tragedy it was. She stated that she believes Gregory's case was investigated thoroughly and meticulously by the police. She also provided a list of resources for suicide prevention for students, like counseling and housing information. However, I do have to say personally, I'm going through one of the hardest experiences in my life right now with the recent passing of my grandmother. And I want to let everybody know that I have one counseling appointment left from now until July. We as students are allowed 8 counseling sessions per calendar year, not per semester, per calendar year. How can you truly care about students' well-being when there is only 8 sessions per calendar year? It's not enough. It's not enough for me and those who struggle like me and even worse than me. If San Jose State truly cares for its students, they would reallocate the police funds to our students and our faculty and hire more counselors rather than cops. If you're a San Jose State student, I invite you to join our student organization, Students for Gregory Johnson, and I will drop some links in the chat as I mentioned earlier. Please feel free to contact us if you have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And then we just have one more announcement before we go into Q&A with the audience. Emma Hollenbach is going to talk about SJSU Students for Police Accountability and their campaign. Emma?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading off some notes. I'm Emma with SJSU Students for Police Accountability. We are working on having more civilian input for how police investigate misconduct. San Jose police have caused $7 million worth of settlements since 2003. San Jose police have also killed 17 people between 2003 and 2020. Are you familiar with Officer Jared Yin and his acts committed on camera during the George Floyd protests in San Jose? Did you ever wonder what happened to him or the dozens of SJPD officers guilty of misconduct? In a separate internal report conducted by the police department, 218 conduct complaints containing 770 allegations were made by fellow police officers and police officials. But only 5% of the allegations were closed with sustained findings. Since 2014, only 3 force allegations from internal affairs were sustained. We intend to have more civilian input as to how we can ensure that these cases are properly investigated, as well as disabling the dependencies that allow the police to go unchecked. If you would like to join us, we will be putting a Google form in the chat and you can send us your email and we can keep you updated that way. I would also like to send our deepest condolences from our entire group to Ms. Johnson, Ms. Valdez, and Josiah. We stand in solidarity with you and I can't imagine your loss. And I really appreciate you talking today. It really opened my eyes to the corruption.
Thanks so much, Emma. So we have about 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we're going to have a little closing session with Monica Noriega, like similar to the one that we opened. Are there any questions from the audience?
I have a question. First of all, I'm sorry I got here late because I really learned so much from you all, and I'm really grateful that I'm here. I have been talking to the social work department about the possibility of not placing social work interns in police affiliated programs. And I was met with a lot of resistance to this last semester. And I'm curious if there has been any efforts to reach out to the social work department in the past, and whether you guys feel that would be a worthwhile endeavor to, kind of forward some of the programs that all of your groups are working towards.
Lori, do you want to respond first?
Okay. I think it would be great if the social workers, but my experience since this has happened, a lot of the people that work in social services, they're kind of bought into the police that they're the heroes, they're the saviors, and they're the ones that do things right. And it's real concerning because a lot of the social workers, my personal experience, there was they always tend to number one, all the social workers, any counselor, psychologist, nobody's trauma informed taught. And whatever they're taught, it's not correct because a lot of the violence that's happening in our communities is by the police. But it's so normalized in our communities and it's just accepted because they're the police and everybody thinks the police don't do no wrong, that it's hard to make people see that we don't need to have the police involved in every single thing. Like when we have a mental health crisis, we don't need our police, we don't need armed police going out to these calls. We need people in our community, mental health professionals with community members who can go out there and reach them and save lives. It would be great if they could get a bunch of social workers, intern ones, before they get corrupted and go to the police, because once you start working with the police, that's it, it's done with. So if we can get social workers who are interns not to go working with the police department right away, but to go working with impacted family members, people in the community, and try to see how they can gear their services and what they've been trained to do to make a difference. And we make another kind of a way of a community outreach, another program that is not geared with police.
Thanks so much. That was a really good question. I appreciate that. And thanks, Lori, for your response. Super insightful.
I think that some of the demands from the Justice for Gregory campaign and especially the student campaign relate to macro social work. And so I would encourage students in the social work program to maybe learn about macro social work with the abolitionist lens, because I think that if they are able to kind of build that framework and understanding, then there is definitely ways to plug in to the student organizing. But as Lori mentioned, it's really important for people to understand how racism and other isms have perpetuated oppression, even within the systems that we are told are supposed to provide social safety nets. And I don't know if Denise has anything that she wants to add.
My mic was muted. Is it on now?
We can hear you, Denise.
Okay. Insofar as my aunt just died, she was 92. She was a social worker. And when she worked, she had to fight for social workers' rights. So There you go. I don't think that as long as the system is controlling the purse strings of the social worker, you're not going to get social workers that buck the system. All right. Just like you very rarely get police that will buck the system because they're thinking about their next paycheck. So let's get real. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, either for our guests or to each other?
I do have a comment. So I am a mental health ambassador at SJSU. I've been working with Lori Valdez to see if I can make sure her and some of her fellow families who have lost people to police violence are getting trained in youth mental health first aid training so they can help support their children and other people in the community who have children who have been affected by police violence. And so I just wanted to I put it in the chat earlier, but I just wanted to make sure that if anyone here would like to get certified in mental health first aid training to help either adults or youth, please contact me at jace.cheng@sjsu.edu and I will help work with Wei Chen, who is a CAP counselor at SJSU, to see if we can offer more trainings, especially since our grant is running towards the end of its time. We are trying very hard to use up as much of the money to make sure our community is being served in ways to help protect mental health.
Thank you. Do you mind putting your email in the chat for those of us who want to contact you? Thank you for providing that resource.
Denise, I have a question for you. If you're there.
I'm here.
So what do you think is going to happen with the reopening of the case of the coroner's office in the county? What is your gut feeling about where this is going to go?
Absolutely nowhere. They created a situation that was a big lie. President Obama knew about what happened to Gregory Johnson Jr. and he did nothing. Okay, the Black Caucus knew about it. The case went all the way to Washington, D.C. Eric Holder's office. See, all these people worked together. They knew. The NAACP, the head of the NAACP, Ben Jelius at the time, they all knew. They told me in order to get an attorney, I don't know if you all realize it, most Black families cannot get attorneys. Okay, because Black attorneys make up 3 to 4% of the entire amount of attorneys in the United States. Okay, doctors even less than that. Black doctors less than that. You see, I know I came through Jim Crow. I remember when we couldn't go to hospitals. We had to go to the Black hospital. I remember whites only water fountains. Okay, well, I had to tell my daddy, can I get a drink? And he told me, no, baby, you have to wait. I'll buy you some water when we get to the store. I remember those kinds of things. And maybe that kind of stuff doesn't make you angry. Well, I was already angry anyway. But I heard that San Jose was the safest place to send your child. No crime, nothing. No, that was a lie. Okay. This system perpetuates lies and then tries to turn each race first against each other. Okay. Then we have a tendency to turn on ourselves because there is no recompense. There's nothing out there for us. And it's always been like that. Dismantle the system. Dismantle the entire, from the presidency on down. That's what I think. No, I don't think it's going to help. No, not at all. People are going to protect their pockets no matter what. That's another thing that they use, pocket change. You know, the chief tells everybody in the police department what to do while they protect their 100,000 plus job a year. People are going to protect their money. And so people's needs will not come first. They will not unless you dismantle the entire system. And yes, racism, white supremacists, they're going to get bolder and bolder. Trump emboldened them. They were already there, but they came out like rats when he got in there. And they're going to focus on anybody that's not white. While some of us sit around and worry about how much money we have in our pocket.
Thank you, Denise. I think given Denise's prediction about where this is going to go, that we can all collectively organize with each other about this situation, if this is another false flag, to try to see if they can get people to basically divest support from Denise and her social movement about getting her son's death seriously investigated. So I encourage everyone to, keep informed about what's going on, because it's really vitally important, especially when they do things like announce they're going to reopen, to ask for accountability and transparency about what they mean by that, and what they're actually going to do about it, because this is a kind of a key moment where we can all really lay some valuable social pressure, social capital, to make sure they don't just open up the file and then close it and say, don't see anything. I think that we've heard enough from both Lori and Denise to know that, we really critically need to rethink campus policing and its worth and value, especially to our students who come from marginalized, intersectionally marginalized communities. And so I'm so thankful for all the speakers here today that have come and shared their stories, their passion, their perspective, their sorrow. I just want to let you know that we're here for you, and we want to organize with you, and we want a better world out of the tragedies that you both basically very detailed in an emotional way shared with San Jose State community. And we
Dr. Stein, can I say one more? Can I say one more thing that I forgot to mention?
Absolutely.
So there was 4 cases. I don't know, everybody probably remembers when Quentin Tarantino went on national MSNBC and he was being targeted by police unions all over the world, saying that they weren't going to support his movies and all that stuff because of 4 cases that he mentioned, that the murdered were murdered and the murderers were murderers, which were the cops that murdered these people. And the 4 cases that he was talking about was Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Sam Dubois, and Antonio's case. Out of those 4 cases, Antonio's case got put on a gag order immediately after that was mentioned on MSNBC. And all the rest of the cases, they continued to get coverage, but Antonio's case was silenced quickly by over here in San Jose. So that is something that has always disturbed me, is like, out of all those 4 cases that, and I don't know how Quentin Tarantino got hold of what he saw in Antonio's case, but he mentioned it on MSNBC Live, and people were saying, hey, Antonio's case is on. I'm like, what? And when I seen that, I was like, well, how is it that Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, and Sam Dubois, those names everybody still talks about? Antonio was one of the 4 names that Quentin Tarantino, and why was his name disappeared? Why did he not get the, and I understand he was undocumented, so his life was probably not as worthy as everybody else's because they were American citizens and he wasn't. So that's something to keep in mind, that why was Antonio's case put on a gag order right away? Why was my son subjected to going through a deposition when they knew the next Monday at 8 a.m. they were going to dismiss the case? Why was there so many lies being told, And because 6 months prior to Antonio's death, he was assaulted by 6 officers in the same vicinity. They were sheriffs and they could have been UPD and San Jose PD. And after that incident, Antonio would tell me, these cops are going to kill me. They don't want me here. They told me, go back to Mexico, you wetback. And I used to tell him he was crazy. I used to tell him, you're crazy. They can't kill you because you're not from here. 6 months later, he's dead. And I don't even know if those officers were any of the officers involved with his death or were around, because they're not giving me everything. UPD hasn't given me everything. They never did an investigation, which is really concerning to me, because when the students were asking for records when it was happening, they said it was under investigation. They couldn't give them information, but now we find out they never even did an investigation. So that's all I want to share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lori. So we have a couple minutes left, and we're going to give it over to Monica Noriega to just kind of give us some closure on this. It's been really emotional and it's been very powerful. Monica?
Yeah, I think at first I just want to say that this abolition work that we're all doing here today also means abolishing the white supremacists and the cop in our heads, all of that energy that gets stuck in our bodies every time we hear these stories, particularly if you are of a multiply marginalized group, if you have multiply oppressed identities. These are stories that live in our bodies, not just from things that we hear in our lifetime, but also because of the soul wounds that we carry from our mothers and our mothers' mothers and our lineages. And so I really encourage everyone here today that identifies as an organizer, identifies as an activist, identifies as a healer, that is really committed to this work, that we also recognize that part of our liberation from these systems means for us to heal together. Just how our organizing and our liberation cannot be achieved in isolation, neither can our healing. So with that said, I'd like us all to engage in another kind of collective grounding exercise to try and move some of this energy that might be stuck in our bodies right now. I know for me personally, I'm feeling a lot of tension, a lot of heaviness right here in my chest. For others, it might be in your sacrum. But what I'd like us all, invite everyone to do, if you feel comfortable, is to unmute yourselves. And just for 15 seconds, we're all gonna hum together. Because vibrations and the ways that we activate those systems in our bodies are things that will regulate us, and that will regulate us together and help activate some of the oldest forms of healing and grounding and safety in a world that does not prioritize our safety and our healing. So please, if you feel comfortable, unmute yourself, and we're just gonna hum together for 15 seconds with our feet on the ground. You can keep your eyes closed, or you can keep them open with this sort of a focus on a certain point in front of you. And so we're just gonna start by taking a deep breath in, and we're gonna hum. Just feel that vibration. Allow it to go from your head all the way down through your shoulders, your chest, your stomach, your sacrum, your legs, and your feet. We'll take another collective breath in to allow that energy to move through us. And let it out. Thank you all for being here. Be well. Sending much love. I will put my contact information in the chat. This can be very flooding, so please don't hesitate to send me a text, an email tonight if you want to talk to me, or if I can always help you find some trauma-informed therapists that will not call the police. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, especially Denise, and thanks to Lori for retelling your stories. I know how hard it is to do that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. The fight continues. Let's fight together. Let's be stronger and smarter about how we fight. We're going to win. Okay? All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.